When it comes to Mario spin-off franchises, there's probably none that had such a rocky history like that of Paper Mario. Most gaming franchises start with a simple foundation that's evolved and iterated upon with each installment. Paper Mario, meanwhile, has 2 games that set up a foundation, 1 game that ignored it completely, 3 games that kinda go back to formula except in a f***ed up monkey's paw sort of way, and 1 remake. God damn, Paper Mario! I know a lot of franchises go through an identity crisis, but never have I seen one do so by its 3rd entry. While all of these games are interesting in their own right, for this video I wanna focus on the weird, often overlooked middle child of the family. Super Paper Mario, the GameCube controller of the Paper Mario franchise, sticks out like a sore thumb among its contemporaries, and has a lot of strange yet prominent flaws, but that hasn't stopped it from being beloved and fondly remembered all these years after. I personally find this game to be very frustrating. Not necessarily to play, most of the time at least, but frustrating because I believe that this game could have been just as good, if not better than the Thousand Year Door. But sadly, a lot of unpolished ideas and questionable design choices hold it back from true greatness. My complicated relationship with this game keeps me up at night, and I feel like I won't be at peace until I put into words all of my grievances. But before I do that, let me just say, well, the usual. This is just my opinion, don't take criticisms of a piece of video you enjoy as a personal attack. No, I'm not making this video just because I'm a salty Thousand Year Door fan who hates this game just because it doesn't have turn-based combat. Anyway, enough legal disclaimers, let's just get this over with. The first thing that every Paper Mario fan asked when this game was revealed is, why? Why are we throwing in the trash a formula that worked for the past 2 games? Well, according to a developer interview, the developers wanted to, quote, surprise people with brand new features, and felt that the 3D flipping gimmick would be best explored in a more traditional platforming style. It's true that a franchise suddenly deciding to do a radical shift in genre is strange, risky, and not something you see often, especially nowadays. But regardless, this is the game we got. So, how well does Super Paper Mario play as a platformer? Not good. If I had to describe the gameplay of Super Paper Mario in one word, it would be unengaging. It lacks the depth necessary to create a challenging and rewarding experience due to its mechanics being shallow in a way that makes them boring or unsatisfying to interact with. Okay, what does any of this mean? There's a lot to unpack in this statement, so let's tackle one thing at a time. The 2 most important aspects of any platformer are movement and level design. The movement in Super Paper Mario is as bare bones as it can get, with your only options being jumping and walking. Compared to all the moves at your disposal in other Mario platformers, SPM falls incredibly short. But then again, a varied and complex moveset isn't a necessity to make a fun 2D platformer. So I'll give the simplistic movement a pass for now. What isn't so easy to excuse is the level design. Most levels in SPM are nothing more than linear corridors. I mean, look at this. I've seen more complex levels made in Super Mario Maker 1 for the Wii U. These levels have barely any interesting set pieces, and besides aesthetics and plot progression, there's not much that makes each level distinct from one another. Some levels have a bigger focus on exploration, which would be a nice change of pace, if not for the fact that the lack of distinctive landmarks makes getting lost and not knowing where you are incredibly easy. Other levels try adding some verticality to the mix, which is great because getting hit means potentially falling down and having to redo certain chunks of level over and over again. Some levels try to make themselves interesting by incorporating some sort of gimmick, like the depth of Chapter 2 or the space sections of Chapter 4, but these gimmicks are few and far between. Maybe it will be nice if every chapter had at least one gimmicky level like this, since again, the lack of interesting movement options means that it's difficult for the developers to make levels interesting purely through platforming alone. But of course, up until now, I have been intentionally ignoring the fire-breathing turtle in the room. I'm talking about the flip. The gimmick that single-handedly changed the future of the Paper Mario series forever. The cardboard ace for the paper sleeve. Can this simple gimmick be enough to... No. Here's the thing. The flip is actually a very cool and interesting mechanic. At first. The way everything looks and functions is really impressive, and the spectacle of it all is enough for the flip to be interesting in the beginning. But around the midway point of the game, I realized that most users of the flip fell into one of three scenarios: revealing hidden paths, avoiding obstacles by getting behind them, or finding hidden info necessary for progression. These scenarios are interesting at first, but after a while they just turn repetitive. Flipping goes from this interesting gimmick to what pretty much feels like a solved puzzle button. Nintendo is known for basing entire games around a single gimmick and squeezing as many interesting uses out of them, so it's odd that this game's gimmick runs out of steam so quickly. I think the mechanic could work, but for something like a puzzle game where it's the entire focus, rather than being shoved into an unrelated 2D action game. The mechanic sounds interesting in theory, but in practice, I don't think it's dynamic or flexible enough for the developers to squeeze an entire game's worth of interesting interactions out of it. It's difficult to know what happened behind the scenes for the flip to end up like this, but considering how much of a pain it must have been to design levels with 2 dimensions in mind, plus the fact that the map designers only had experience making simple RPG maps for TTYD, or had no prior map designing experience at all, it's likely that the reason the level design ended up being so bland was because the flip was simply too ambitious for its own good.
Hey, check it out, I learned the baseline from Final Fantasy II.
Have you ever noticed that despite having the entire show named after him, Jerry is by far the least funny main character in Seinfeld? Anyways, I've already gone over why the platforming aspect of this game is not very good, but that's okay. Maybe platforming is not the main focus of the game, but rather something more intense like combat, right? I think these clips speak for themselves. Even as a kid, I could feel something off about this game, but it's only now that I have the skills and knowledge necessary to finally put into words why. You would not think the combat of this game is shallow while looking at the surface. I mean, it has 4 playable characters with unlockable abilities, plus 3 fully optional ones, so why is it that the game has such an empty feeling combat system despite having so many tools at your disposal? Simple. Because this is a case of quantity over quality. All of these abilities are extremely one-dimensional and uninteresting to use. What makes a game mechanic fun is not necessarily the function it provides, but rather the interesting opportunities and interactions that having said mechanic at your disposal opens up. Take the dash from Celeste for example. Functionally, it only provides a small burst of speed in one of 8 directions, which isn't that interesting by itself, but when it's combined with many other level-specific mechanics, plus a lot of momentum-based chicanery found in Farewell and Grandmaster courses, is what allows the mechanic to be flexible and dynamic in its applications, and for Celeste to have an incredibly high skill ceiling despite having such a simple moveset. The pixels in comparison have no such flexibility. They do not provide any significant gameplay possibilities or decision making due to the overly simplistic nature of their functions. They are not fun to use because, similar to the flip, the mechanic is too rigid for the developers to be able to do anything truly interesting with it. Not to mention that only about 2 of them are actually useful 90% of the time, while the others are only situationally useful at best or borderline useless at worst, acting more like glorified level progression tools rather than as a fun and dynamic game mechanic. Besides the pixels, your only other combat option is good old jumping on enemies. It's obvious that the developers wanted this game to be closer to a traditional 2D Mario platformer, but Mario platformers aren't known from having great combat or bosses. Enemies in those games are supposed to be just another platforming obstacle. Jumping on them is satisfying because it's simple and effective. Having to jump on every Goomba 3 times just to kill it doesn't make it 3 times more fun, it just makes it tedious. I haven't even gone into how almost none of the enemies in this game pose any real threat, but I wouldn't even be complaining about it if fighting them was fun. Kirby games are also very simple and easy while having mostly pushover enemies, but it's the huge amount of copy abilities with varied and diverse movesets that makes playing through those games fun and engaging, and this game has none of that. Now, I have been bashing the combat system for a while, but ultimately, it's not that bad. Shallow mechanics are a bit of a bummer, but as long as the game has good game feel, it won't be that big of a problem. Oh god damn it. Okay, so Remember those 4 playable characters I mentioned a while ago? With the exception of Bowser, who deals double damage, there's no real reason to use the other 3, besides their specific character abilities that, just like the pixels, are necessary for level progression. This means that every time you have to change characters or pixels, you have to open this menu, choose your desired change, and wait for a small swapping animation to finish. Every single time. Not only does this kill the pacing, not only does it leave you wide open if you're not careful, but also, you know who everyone hates the water temple because of how annoying it is to having to constantly change in and out of the item boots? Well, imagine having to deal with that through the whole f***ing game. This clunky menu hurts the game much more than you would think. But honestly, I can't even blame the developers that much, considering that this is what they had to work with. Maybe everything is better on the alternative timeline where SPM released on the GameCube, but alas, Nintendo ate the motion controls apple, and now we're stuck in sideways Wii Remote hell. Also, I know that this section of the video was supposed to be about SPM as an action RPG, yet so far I've talked almost exclusively about combat, but honestly, this game doesn't even feel that much like an RPG. You can level up, but doing so only increases either HP or attack automatically, so it kinda feels like an afterthought. There's no equipment, there's barely any side quests, there are collectible cards and recipes if you're into that. Like, for f***'s sake, they didn't even bother to include the badge system. You know, one of the most defining mechanics of the previous Paper Mario games. A system so good it was ripped off by Hollow Knight and is now a common trope among Metroidvania games. I don't think the badge system would have automatically solved every problem of this game, but I don't know. It would at least add the slightest amount of customization and strategy. So ultimately, what is this game even going for? It's a platformer action RPG where the platforming is shallow and the RPG elements superficial. It combines two genres while featuring none of the things that make either of them great. I know Nintendo is not immune to making bad games, but even when they do, you can at least tell that said games had a clear design focus in mind, as misguided as said focus might have been. I cannot say the same for SPM. It feels unpolished and unfocused in a way that resembles an overfunded Kickstarter project. This game is a strange anomaly that defies physics, perplexes philosophers, and society would be better off if it never even existed. Still better than Sticker Star. Despite that up to this point I have been doing nothing more but bashing Super Paper Mario, I don't actually think it's a bad game. It can still be entertaining, in a cocomelon turn your brain off kind of way. So why do I think this game is still worth playing, even if not much of value will be lost if all of the non-cutscene sections were replaced by a whack-a-mole minigame? Simply because this might be an unholy abomination of a Paper Mario game, but it's still a Paper Mario game. Everything that makes the Paper Mario franchise great is here.
What?
The presentation is still as tight as ever, featuring a brand new, let's call it polygonal art style, which although is not everyone's cup of tea, I personally love. The writing is still as charming as ever, featuring the franchise's staple quirky Elbot-inspired humor, trademark. The scenarios that Mario and the gang go through are some of the most interesting and out there in the series. Mario rescuing prehistoric people captured by sentient flowers, Mario going to space 7 months before Mario Galaxy, Mario owning a 1 million debt of a foreign currency and being forced to do manual labor to pay it, Mario infiltrating the house of the average Redditor, Mario f***ing going to hell before he dies. The soundtrack is very unique and memorable. It comes from that pre-Wii U era of Mario music, where they still hadn't set orchestral and jazz as the standard, so composers were allowed to be more experimental. It uses a great variety of abstract sounding synths, while occasionally adding more traditional sounding instruments to the mix. This gives the soundtrack a very diverse and otherworldly feeling, fitting for a game about traveling through dimensions. And since the more realistic sounding instruments are used sparingly, it makes the few songs that rely on them much more impactful, adding a lot more emotional weight to some of the most important segments of the game, which I will get into shortly. The characters are probably the single best aspect of this game. Every Mario RPG where Bowser is a playable character is an automatic 10 out of 10 for me, and him constantly gushing over his fake marriage with Peach is both charming and hilarious. The new big bad of the game, Count Bleck, absolutely owns every scene he's in. His dapper looks and pompous personality make him very entertaining and memorable. He kinda feels like a Toby Fox character with his constant odd quirks and surprising character depth. Also, look at this. Look at him. You're telling me that the goddamn clock from Don't Hug Me I'm Scared became a Tumblr sexy man, but not him? Besides Count Black, there is also the ragtag group of misfits he calls his minions, and while they are not the deepest characters in the world, they are still pretty entertaining in their own right, especially on these chapter end cutscenes where they all hang out and bicker with one another. These scenes absolutely did not have to be in the game, but I guess it's Paper Mario tradition at this point to showcase the antics of an off-screen character at the end of each chapter, and I'm glad that's the case because these scenes are honestly a highlight of the game for me. Speaking of characters, I think it's finally time to talk about the reason this game is so beloved: the story. Super Paper Mario is a story about love. A story about a forbidden couple tragically torn apart. A story about a husband filled with grief over his lost love and hatred of a world that took it away, succumbing to a desperate and delusional quest for revenge. Holy fuck! I wasn't expecting a Mario game to get all Shakespearean on me. This is the true plot of Super Paper Mario. All of the dimension hopping shenanigans are interesting and fun, but ultimately, Count Black is the true protagonist of the story. He is not a one-dimensional villain, but a tragic broken shelf of a man focused on a selfish and nihilistic plan to punish a world he felt did him wrong. But it's only through coming to terms with his mistakes, plus the emotional support of his loved ones, that he's able to turn his life around and become Lumiere once more. Of course, I'm not saying the story is perfect. This is a kids game after all, so you get a lot of
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards
moments. But man, the game with the stupid otaku lizard actually made me feel something. This video was mostly an excuse for me to talk about game design, so I don't have anything really insightful to say about the story. There's probably other videos that go into it in much more detail, but just know that even if the story doesn't seem that interesting from the outside, it's thanks to great presentation, characterization, and surprisingly profound subject matter that makes Super Paper Mario have probably maybe the greatest plot in the entire Mario franchise. Is Super Paper Mario a good game? Yes, the graphics, story, and music are fantastic, but at the end of the day, this is a video game we're talking about. Unless we're talking about this, gameplay is the most important part of any game. It's the thing the player is engaging with most of the time. So can I really call the game good if I only enjoy a small portion of it? Yes. Has this ever happened to you? You find a game that looks neat, you buy it, you play it, you have a good time while doing it, but years later you find yourself unable to remember anything noteworthy about it? If that's the case, that game might have succeeded at being an entertaining piece of software, but it probably failed at being a good piece of art. Obviously, I'm generalizing here since not all games are created with the same goals in mind, and you could make the argument that game design is an art form by itself, but the point is, there is a reason The Room is still fondly remembered to this day, while the average MCU Phase 4 film is not, despite one having objectively higher production value. Super Paper Mario might be many things, but one thing it's not is forgettable. I remember the Summer Kingdom being swallowed by the void, leaving an empty husk of a world behind. I remember Nastasia trying to convince Black to stop his plans, and even heavily implying some romantic feelings. I remember Jadis and Gramby pretty much having to sacrifice their own child for the sake of the entire world. This is the second Mario game to feature child mortality. Third one if you suck at Yoshi's Island. Would I enjoy Super Paper Mario more if all of my gameplay gripes were fixed? Probably. But do I still consider it one of my favorite games, even if there are games that are overall better designed and more fun to play? Yes. All pieces of media are flawed in some way, and our taste in fiction is dictated by how many such flaws we're willing to accept. Nothing in this world is perfect, but that's okay. Mistakes are what makes us human after all. Hello there! If you are listening to my voice right now, then that means you watched the video in its entirety. Unless you for some reason decided to skip right to the end, you weirdo. If you couldn't tell by my pathetically low subscriber count, this is my first serious video project on this channel, so I would really appreciate any sort of feedback you might have. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Or don't. I don't know. I'm not your dad. Or am I?